Welcome to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed from Blue Water Civil Design, your host. The Southbound Podcast is stories from influential leaders who are shaping the South. And our guest today is Dr. Robert Benedict, who is the current faculty member at the Clemson Masters in Real Estate program and former director. Thank you, Dr. Benedict, for being with us today.
Patrick, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I've always appreciated your conversations and your extensive experience and development and education and your influence on people's lives. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's fun to talk to you. So
yeah.
Really appreciate you.
Well, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got to be in the position you are, and your experience and your professional career.
Well, I'm a native of Charlotte, so not too far away. And I'm the son of a World War II veteran and a nurse. And, I'm a baby boomer who grew up in post-war America in the suburbs of Charlotte. With that, a strong work ethic was instilled in me. My parents were both children of the Depression. So to say they were frugal is a gross understatement.
Yeah, I still have learned to save rubber bands just from my grandmother, who was a Depression baby, and she always just never throw away a rubber band.
Yeah, and my mother, interestingly enough, she had such a distrust of banks because of that, because her father lost everything with a bank failure in Tennessee where she was a child. And I honestly believe she would have hid everything in a hole in the backyard, all of her money, rather than put it in the bank.
Right. Yeah, I see that. I see how that can be. Yeah.
But, growing up in Charlotte was a lot of fun. I went to UNC Charlotte when it was a much smaller school at the time and wound up going straight through to the University of Georgia, where I got my MBA. It was an interesting time in my life because the school that I really wanted to go to for my graduate business studies turned me down.
Oh, really?
But I got into Georgia at the last minute, and it wound up being something that changed my life.
Yeah. So got an MBA you went to UNC Charlotte and then got into the MBA program at UGA.
That's right.
How did you feel when you got there? Was it something?
Well, I can vividly remember sitting in the hallway before my first class. And this is something I tell my current students a lot. I was sitting in the hallway and I'm looking to my left, looking to my right. I'm seeing military officers who are working on their MBA. I see people that may have worked for major banks, and I'm thinking, why am I here? Why'd they let me in? But quickly realized after a few weeks, if they accepted you under the pretense that you would succeed if you did the work. And I realized that, if I worked hard, I could easily hold my own against those folks.
Wow, that's awesome. So when you finished your MBA program at UGA, what was was there opportunities? Were you interviewing places? What was going on?
Well, back then they didn't have very good placement services. So,
here's your MBA. Good luck, son.
And that was basically it. And I can remember going to the little hole in the wall office they had and flipping through notebooks where they would take position announcements and put them in these notebooks. I'd flip through.
Oh, wow.
So I came out of Georgia thinking, well, maybe I can go into banking, and wound up looking back in Charlotte. And I actually worked with a placement service. They said, there's a position available with the Travelers Insurance Company in Charlotte, and it's for a surety and bond analyst. And I said,
what's that?
I said, yeah, I don't know what that is. That sounds pretty good. It sounds impressive.
So, the longer the job title, the higher the pay, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I said, that's pretty prestigious. So I went through the interview for that position. It sounded interesting, sounded good. And the human resources guy that was there said, there's this guy upstairs on the 15th floor. This was in a downtown office building in Charlotte. There's this guy on the 15th floor. He works by himself.
At Travelers.
At Travelers.
Okay.
Same company. And, I think he needs a real estate assistant. Would you be interested in going up and talking to him? So I said, sure. So I remember getting off the elevator and looking into a room that was really suitable for about 8 or 10 people. Mm-hmm. And there's one person in there at a desk. And he had all these spreadsheets spread out. And I thought, this guy must be the wizard. They put him up here by himself.
Oh,
he's got to be really smart. And I wondered, does he have bad social skills? Or
yeah,
but no, to the contrary.
The guy on the 15th floor.
Yeah. I said, that's the think tank up there. So, I met Mike McNichlos, who interviewed me.
Okay. Yeah.
And he later became my mentor. And I got the job at a whopping $15,000 a year salary.
Oh yeah.
It's like 1980.
Yeah.
And, it wound up being something that really changed my life. And Mike still is my mentor to this day.
Oh, wow. That's an amazing story. So go to UGA, get your MBA, kind of think you're going to go into banking, and then you interview at Travelers, and Travelers has this real estate development arm, commercial real estate development arm, and that's where you meet Mike McNichlos, your mentor. Tell us a little bit about Mike and kind of his influence on your life, and
sure,
what happened next working with Travelers and everything else.
Well, Mike was a regional real estate manager. Really a regional real estate investment manager, which means Travelers, like a lot of other life insurance companies, were very active in commercial real estate, mm-hmm. where they would finance office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes, or they would joint venture with many developers, and they would also acquire buildings. So Mike was in charge of the Carolinas, mm-hmm. and he sent me first to the Appraisal Institute classes. I'd had a few courses at Georgia in real estate, but it was more finance oriented. So went to the Appraisal Institute, went through numerous courses, and started working closely with Mike, learning anything and everything about the development business. Wow. And that was an interesting time to work with Mike because he had developed strong relationships with many of the iconic developers in the Carolinas. Just in Charlotte alone, there were people like Smokey Bissell and Johnny Harris, mm-hmm. John Crosland, many others, and they all respected the major life companies because that was a source of financing for them.
Right. Yeah.
So Mike brought me along, and then I stayed at the Travelers. He left, and I stayed at the Travelers, was promoted to Atlanta. Spent several years in Atlanta, and this is again, the early to mid '80s. Mm-hmm. And then I was transferred again to Washington D.C., where I was an investment manager in D.C. Those were great times. It was a wonderful time to be in real estate development. Mm-hmm. All those markets were just exploding.
Oh, sure.
And then Travelers wanted to send me to Hartford, Connecticut.
Ooh.
And I thought, I'm going the wrong way. And Hartford in the mid '80s was not exactly a garden spot by any stretch of the imagination. So I reconnected with Mike again. He had gone to work for U.S. Shelter here in Greenville, South Carolina. I was also interviewing with a bank at the time. And Mike said, well, listen, why don't you come to Greenville. Let's have a couple of days where we talk, and I'll show you what we're involved in here in Greenville and mm-hmm. elsewhere. And I followed Mike here to Greenville.
Wow!
I started with U.S. Shelter.
And about what time was this?
This was like 1984, 1985.
Wow. Okay.
And
so Greenville was very. I mean, just not even a blimp on the radar for people.
Yeah, you're right, Patrick. I mean,
coming out of the textile age, and
it was a very interesting time. Greenville was starting to show some signs of life again. Downtown was showing some signs of life. You had the Hyatt, and it wasn't just a Hyatt; it was a Hyatt Regency that the Priskers had agreed to open here in Greenville. That was a garden change. I mean, that was a game changer.
Yeah.
And U.S. Shelter was developing their first tower, Shelter Tower 1, followed by Shelter Tower 2.
Okay.
And the founders of U.S. Shelter, Barton Tuck, who worked closely with people like Buck Mickle, Tommy Weish, and others, were looking to really bring Greenville's downtown back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And U.S. Shelter was mostly a real estate syndicator at that time, but they had an active development arm, which is where Mike and I worked. And we were doing a lot of apartment communities, not only in the upstate of South Carolina, but places in North Carolina. And we started working in Florida as well.
Yeah.
So U.S. Shelter had a national footprint, believe it or not, in little Greenville, South Carolina. And they brought in a lot of talent, many of whom are still here in Greenville as developers.
Yeah, that's my understanding. U.S. Shelter has a talent roster, a part of it from all the private developers today that were associated with U.S. Shelter back in the day.
That's true. It later became Insignia. Andrew Farkas purchased U.S. Shelter. U.S. Shelter was dealt a tough blow in 1986, 1987 with tax reform.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where the syndication business had largely been about acquiring properties to generate tax losses. And under the Reagan administration, the Tax Act of 1986 changed all that. And it was getting into, you need to be an active participant rather than a passive participant. So with that, U.S. Shelter changed dramatically. Insignia acquired it. And, the company eventually moved what was left to New York with Andrew Farkas.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of those people that continued with Andrew Farkas as Insignia, they also stayed here.
Yeah. Yeah. So when they built, when U.S. Shelter built U.S. Shelter Building 1 and 2, what are those buildings now?
They are now, they became Liberty Square.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's right. All right. Cool.
They were designed by Odell here in Charlotte. I will say the design is good. It's, Greenville didn't have the same office rents that major markets had elsewhere.
But that's really neat. I mean, those are pretty iconic now today.
They are, and the real test of a real estate property is what happens when the tenants change.
Sure.
Can a new tenant mix still fit? And they to this day have a great tenant mix. They're well located.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about that as pretty cemented as downtown Greenville, iconic. You get the Hyatt right there, and then you got the Liberty Square. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And then office space today. I mean, even after the pandemic, we're still kind of figuring out that dynamic of how that works.
We are. There's a lot that the Urban Land Institute has put out in terms of their research as far as will the office environment ever be as it was before?
Sure.
But that's probably a topic for another conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to come back to ULI, but I want to hear a little bit more about Mike McNichlos as a mentor. Tell me a little bit about Mike, who he is, and kind of what happened next after U.S. Shelter as well.
Well, Mike he's a native of South Florida.
Okay. Yeah.
And before going to Charlotte with the Travelers, he'd been in Philadelphia, and he was considered on the fast track. Yeah. And he was a hot commodity in terms of the developers recognized that, and they were trying to lure him away. But he's Irish, went to Notre Dame.
Okay.
He is one of the most avid Notre Dame fans I've ever been around.
Oh, yeah.
Being an Irishman, he also had a temper, but he contained that temper. It was never vented toward anybody except maybe his desk, where he would occasionally slam a desk drawer.
So I get a pass whenever I get upset. I say, "Oh, it's just the Irish in me." You're right.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Jokes aside, but
and then he founded Carolina Holdings after being at U.S. Shelter.
Okay, and the Carolina Holdings is still around.
They still
Huge
exist today,
influence.
doing well. They have a nice development underway currently out at Cherrydale.
Oh wow!
Right now.
Yeah,
and they've done well over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Mike and I was a partner with him, along with Bill Masavic and Bob Ingram. Britt Goodson also was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great time to be actively developing. We were developing throughout North and South Carolina, but also very active in Tennessee and Virginia. Spent a lot of time on the road.
Yeah. So about what time was that when you switched over from U.S. Shelter to Carolina Holdings?
Well, I made the move to Carolina Holdings I joined Mike and them in 1993.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we were coming out of a little bit of a slowdown at that time. But I remember one of our first developments was a neighborhood anchored grocery store development.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of that with folks like Bilo and some others.
Right.
Today, most of their developments are with Publix.
Yeah.
Like
Okay. Right.
But we were doing lifestyle centers. We did lifestyle center in places like Cookeville, Tennessee, Mount Juliet, Tennessee, outside of Nashville.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I enjoyed 13 and a half years at Carolina Holdings. Okay. Learned a lot. It was a tremendous experience. But as we got into 2005 and early 2006, I'd been teaching part-time at the University of Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
As an adjunct.
Right.
I didn't play golf. So I thought, well, since I'm not on the golf course on a Friday afternoon, and it's still remarkable that Georgia let me teach classes on a Friday. The students were good sports about it.
Yeah.
They didn't want to take the class on Friday afternoon, but they let me teach down there. And that's when I started thinking about maybe a shift to academia.
Wow.
Full time.
Wow. Well, that sounds great. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back. The Southbound Podcast is sponsored by Blue Water Civil Design. Blue Water Civil Design is a professional civil engineering firm located in Greenville, South Carolina, serving the southeastern United States and beyond. Started in 2010, the firm is bound together by 4 founding professional engineers with more than 100 years combined experience in all aspects of civil site work engineering, land planning, site selection, and analysis. For more information, please visit us at bluewatercivil.com. Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed, your host from Blue Water Civil Design. Today's guest is Dr. Robert Benedict, current faculty member at the Clemson Masters in Real Estate Development Program. Dr. Benedict has been sharing with us his early career as a developer. So I think that's probably one of the best stories that I can think of is you had your turn in your hand in something that you didn't know you were going to get into, which is real estate development. Met Mike McNichlos, his impact on your life. At Carolina Holdings, a lot of major developments in your time. And then as everyone else is playing golf, you decided to spend some time as a professor. Did you ever think that you would go into education and academia as a developer, or was there a knack? And how did you make that switch? That's just that's a great story.
Well, going back to my father, Patrick, he was a World War II vet, but unfortunately he had to drop out of college. Mm-hmm. He was at Iowa State.
Okay.
And he had to drop out, and he beat into me and my sister how you had to get as much education as you could.
Yeah.
There was something that people could never take away from you.
That's right.
And my older sister got her PhD. She was a nurse anesthetist who went on and became a professor in nursing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She taught at Columbia University in New York, and then she was at most recently MUSC. Mm-hmm. But I watched her, and we used to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
So she was a big influence on me. And I met a gentleman named Terry Ferris. Terry was from St. Louis. He also went and got his PhD a little bit later in life. He had been a developer and a public official in St. Louis. He started a PhD program at Clemson. He started the Master of Real Estate Development program, but he also was aware and had been active with the PhD program at Clemson.
Okay.
So got to know Terry, was a guest lecturer a few times with him, and I started talking to him and said, what would I need to do if I wanted to transition full-time into academia? And he said, well, we have this PhD program. It's new. It's interdisciplinary. And I would encourage you to think about that. So in 2006, mid-2006, I told my wife, I said, I really want to do this.
Oh, wow.
And she looked at me like I was from outer space, or taken over by aliens. But no, she was very supportive of it. And I had told her over the years that it was something I wanted to transition to after I'd saved some money.
Mm-hmm.
So as a non-traditional student, I went back to Clemson, and I was teaching these students that I would in the MRED program, but at the same time, I would be in classes with them working on my PhD. And when I was finishing my PhD, Terry decided to relinquish the directorship of the Master of Real Estate Development program and just go back to being a regular teaching faculty. And through a series of events, they asked me to stay on and take over that program.
Wow.
And that was 2011.
Okay. Yeah.
We were still on the main campus at that time, but the graduate business programs had recently moved to downtown Greenville.
That's right.
And we had an opportunity to follow suit, really worked hard to convince people that we needed to be in downtown Greenville. And we followed the MBA programs over here in 2013, and we're currently in the one building in downtown Greenville now.
It's a beautiful spot.
Yeah, it's first-class academic space.
Yeah.
And the major advantage of that is being in downtown Greenville, we've attracted a more geographically diverse student body.
Right.
Clemson's a wonderful campus, but at the same time, Greenville and having our MRED program there, it's like, teaching and working in a living lab. There's so much activity going on right now.
Very applicable. Yeah. Camperdown, all the downtown developments, the surrounding areas.
It's fun because we can actually look out the window, the one building, and point to almost every development around us. And the Clemson Master of Real Estate Development program has had some involvement with many of them where students may have worked for that developer. Mm-hmm. They may actually be the developer on those projects, or the developer may be an adjunct professor in our program. Yeah. And we've got a great stable of adjunct professors who love the program and being able to give back.
That's important. I think that might be a little bit where you come from, and taking your expertise and experience and sharing it with the future generations.
You're right. It's a lot of fun. The average age of our students, they're graduate students, so the average age is 25, 26 years old. Mm-hmm. And they come from a wide range of backgrounds. They're not all finance quants. And I'm saying that affectionately.
Right.
That's kind of what I was. But we'll have students that come from backgrounds such as planning, architecture, mm-hmm. Health sciences. And with that, you get a lot of creativity and you get a lot of enthusiasm just because of their age, 25, 26.
Yeah.
And it's gratifying to work with them, and then love hearing about what our alumni are doing as they've been out a few years and really starting to succeed and make it in the business.
Yeah. So I will give you the title as the professor for the Clemson MRED program because I mean over the past 11 years we've seen all this growth and the turnout of y'all's alumni has been amazing, and I mean their influence is, it's immeasurable but worth its weight in gold. I mean that's something that I want to tip my hat to you and thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it wasn't just me. Obviously, Terry Ferris started the program, really got it on good footing, and I work with some wonderful folks right now. We have a new director. I relinquished the directorship earlier this year. Dustin Reed has come in and is now the active director, which is so it's a fun transition right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So. Tell us a little bit about living in the upstate, calling the upstate your home, Greenville, and what did that look like over the past 30 some odd years? You moving here in the late 80s, 90s, and then kind of how you kind of have seen the growth come.
Greenville has changed in so many ways, but and I'm saying that where a lot of the growth has been very good for Greenville.
Yeah.
Downtown Main Street's a remarkable story. And I knew about that before I came here. Still cannot believe to this day that Greenville leaders, going back to the 1970s, brought in a gentleman named Lawrence Halprin, who was a phenomenal designer, city planner, urban planner. And the city leaders working with Lawrence Halprin convinced business owners, retailers, that we needed to narrow Main Street, plant trees for a new streetscape. So think about that today. You're a retailer. You're going to want as much visibility as you could possibly have.
Right.
And somebody comes to you and says, well, we're going to make it a little bit tougher to, go down Main Street. We're going to cut it to 2 lanes. We're going to plant these trees. And surprisingly, everybody bought into it. I shouldn't say everybody bought into it, but enough people bought into it where it wound up being great foresight. So when I came to Greenville, it was shortly after the Hyatt Regency had been completed. That was early 80s, like 1982. The shelter towers had been built, but you also had the Peace Center that came along.
Right.
The Peace family, what they did was
huge,
remarkable. So you had 2 anchors, North Main and South Main. And today, of course, that's gone beyond the Peace Center.
The West End,
past Fluor Field, and to think about the next chapters with Unity Park and the growth we're going to see. I still think the best is to come.
Right.
But, the Greenville story started capturing a lot of people's attention, not so much in the 80s and 90s, but certainly in recent years. I mean, Falls Park is just a great story that's captured national attention. That park has won the Rudy Bruner Award, which is a national award of excellence to well-planned parks. So fell in love with Greenville. When I first came here, Main Street was pretty sleepy. I remember the cruising on Main Street.
That's right.
In the mid '80s, that was still going on. But it was those first few decades when I was here, it was still considered a 3rd-tier market. Yeah,
right.
Today it's risen to, in my opinion, I feel strongly it's a good, strong 2nd-tier market. In fact, the Urban Land Institute puts out every year their emerging trends report where they rank cities in terms of desirability for real estate activity, investment, economic growth. And Greenville, for a small city, has risen to 40th in the country.
Wow.
And that's ahead of places that we all know that are much, much larger than that.
Yeah.
So it's on the rise. A lot of people have noticed it. National developers started coming into Greenville, pretty much the mid 2000s, first decade of the 2000s, and in recent years, that's really been a trend that is something we all see.
Well, and I think that you're a lot of what you've done is study cities and all across the country, all across the world, and then you've kind of named Greenville as your home. I think that that's incredible to hear from someone that's seen a lot and has been has experienced a good bit, and to still give it that shine on the best is yet to come.
Yes.
And that's exciting. So tell us a little bit about you made that transition to being a full PhD student right before the recession. And then so the recession kind of occurred, and Greenville, the upstate wasn't, I mean, there's some people who lost big time, but at the same time, how was that transition for, current developers and younger generations and stuff?
Great question. I mean, a lot of people left the real estate profession with the recent recession we had, the Great Recession, 2008 to 2011. And I think with that, there's a little bit of a gap right now where you have what I call the young lions today.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
who have come into the profession largely following the Great Recession. Maybe they came into it in 2011, 12, 13 or later. And then you have the old dogs who are like me, who somehow weathered it.
Yeah.
When I weathered it by going back to graduate school and getting a PhD. And it was funny. I had people come up to me and say, gosh, you were really lucky. You got out of this business in 2006. Right. What did you know that I didn't know? Yeah. Well, it was the first time in my life I think I had good timing on something. But
that's awesome.
No, it's fun to work with what I call the young lions, and I'm talking about male and female.
Yeah. Right.
Right. They have a lot of innovative ideas. They're masters of technology.
Oh, yeah.
And the big trend right now, I think, is it's all about the data.
Oh, sure. Right.
It's all about the data, which gets into market research in terms of real estate.
Yeah. And you got to back it up. I mean, there's one thing, it looks good, but does it actually add up on a piece of paper? And that's something that, this generation, the young lions definitely need to know, like, hey, prove it to me by the number sake, not just from the appearance.
That's a big part of it. In fact, still the finance component is the foundation of it. It still has to generate, viable returns, and it has to be within what we call the risk reward framework.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tremendous risk, but at the same time, there can be tremendous
reward on the back end.
Rewards on the back end.
Yeah.
So it's all about how you measure the financial piece of it, which is backed by the market research and all the data that you can gather.
Right.
But we teach our students today to take a more holistic viewpoint of real estate development. We don't want the students who basically want to come in and just do a single project here, a single project there. I mean, it's about enhancing the community,
right?
Complementing the character of the city or town that they're going to be working in.
Yeah,
it really is. And I'm a lover of history, so I always preach that you have to understand the city, you have to understand the neighborhood.
That's right.
How did it really grow? How did it evolve? And what gives it the character that it has?
Yeah, we had Nancy Whitworth on just the podcast and she spoke a lot about that you got to be engaged in the community. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to accomplish your projects that you have dreamt about and want to do and everything. So that's very, very important to engage.
And Nancy is a master of that right now.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us, maybe give us an example of maybe some of your students or excuse me, alumni that are out there. We were discussing before this that you have a guest lecturer coming, and he works for SpaceX.
That's Scott Heiler, and Scott was a very good student in the program. He's originally from the Pawleys Island area of South Carolina, Wofford graduate, came into the MRED program, and always dreamed of working somehow in the space industry.
Wow.
So I'm trying to get my arms around that. Here you are in a graduate real estate program, and yet you want to be in the space industry. Well, Scott was very persuading.
That's
and
good.
The MBA program had brought in one of their alumni who was working for SpaceX, different area than real estate completely. And Scott heard he was going to be the graduation speaker. So he was able to convince our asset manager in the one building, Jeremy Krober, that all he wanted to do was just slip in a little early, meet this gentleman, introduce himself, and then he would quietly leave. And Jeremy relented, let Scott come in. So Scott took the most of the opportunity. He met this gentleman. Scott showed him some of the work he'd been doing. It was probably a 15-minute conversation, and that was it. And then one day, about 9 months, 10 months later, Scott gets a call out of the blue from a search firm. And the search firm said, we were encouraged to contact you because you made a very good impression upon so-and-so with SpaceX. We have a position that would be working at our new master plan community, which is outside of Brownsville, Texas, for SpaceX.
Wow.
And Scott was hired. He relocated to Brownsville, Texas.
Yeah.
Worked on this master plan community using his real estate skills that he had, including the finance piece of it.
Yeah.
And has since been promoted and is on the West Coast of Florida right now.
Wow.
And I laughingly call him a disciple of Elon Musk because he's a big advocate.
Yeah. Well, that's his boss. That's
right. Yes.
That's amazing. And I think that just one more time, I want to tell you that I know that you're retiring at the end of this year, and I want to talk about that. But also, being an educator, your work doesn't go unnoticed, and it's everlasting. I think that impact that you've had on your students, and from the upstate and beyond. And as you see, we have some of your alumni who are now working for the next big thing, which is space travel. My son talks to me all the time about space travel, and I think one of the coolest things that I tell him is there's somebody on Earth right now that's going to be the first person on Mars.
Yeah.
Let's kind of think about that. So anyway, but
well, thanks for saying that.
Yeah. Well, all right. So real quick, I want to make one more turn to Urban Land Institute, aka ULI.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and its influence on you, and how that's kind of helped you as a professor as well.
Well, the Urban Land Institute is the preeminent nonprofit that supports responsible real estate development and urban planning. Mm-hmm. It attracts the best real estate developers, not only nationally but internationally. It also has within its membership architects, planners, contractors, real estate brokers, investors. So it is always the best resource to go to in terms of what they like to call best cases in real estate. And the Urban Land Institute has, as part of its code of ethics, that you not only respect the land, but you respect the community, the people, and you also keep in mind that everything you do is for future generations.
Right.
And the lasting impact of the development or whatever aspect somebody's involved in.
Very significant.
It really is. And they always showcase the best developments. They have national conferences. We just got back from taking all of our students to Chicago for
great.
the Urban Land Institute fall meeting. They also have active regional and local councils, which is what they call them. So there's an upstate chapter that we have here in South Carolina as part of the South Carolina Council. But we use their textbooks. They publish very good literature that we closely follow.
Yeah.
And so it's a very important part of our program, and it aligns with my own personal ethics too about the business.
Which I think is very, very important, because some people may be thinking like, all right, I'm going to get into real estate because I know so-and-so and they make a lot of money and stuff like that. And there, as you said, there is a lot of risk that goes into development and big reward. But it's not chalked up that way. I mean, there's a responsibility piece to it, and engaging the community, and where the benefit comes back around for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And the best developers I know, been associated with over the years, are the ones who give back. They're active in the community. They want to make sure that what they do is responsible. They're very focused on green building practices today. Yeah, they're very focused on doing something that's going to add to the character of the community.
Right.
So yeah, it's something that we closely follow and are involved in.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back.
Sure.
Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast, stories from influential leaders shaping the South. Today's guest is Dr. Robert Benedict of the Clemson Masters in Real Estate Development Program. Dr. Benedict, you've shared a great number of stories with us today, and thank you.
Thanks.
You're coming up here in the next in 7 months. You're going to be in retirement. Congratulations! After your 11 years of servitude as a college professor, that's amazing. At Clemson, what are you planning to do in retirement?
Well, Judy and I, my wife Judy, who's fantastic, we're very excited about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll leave academia completely. I'd like to stay on, teach a course here or there, but be more of an adjunct professor. But I'm a lover of history at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'm active right now with the Greenville County Historical Society. I'm going to take on a larger role with that. Look forward to being involved with that. Have aspirations one day of even writing some about the icons in real estate development.
Oh, cool.
Throughout the Carolinas, many of whom they're no longer with us, or they've retired for many years, and I certainly don't want them to just fade away and be forgotten.
Yeah. And that's a little bit like with this podcast, what we want. We want to make sure that we're capturing some of these stories that, we don't want them to get forgotten, but, that also need to be shared.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Then our daughters live in Texas. They're both in grad school down there.
Cool.
So
yeah,
I guess back to that thing about my father beating the value of higher education into us.
Yeah.
So we plan to spend some time in the Bluebonnet State.
Oh, awesome.
Down there, which will be fun. And had a biking trip in France that's been delayed or postponed 3 times because of the pandemic. So we're still hoping to go to France and do that sometime next year.
That's fantastic. So tell me a little bit about, a lover of history, a lover of city design and architecture. Are you going to, use a little bit of the Greenville Historic Preservation Society? Are you going to focus a little bit on some of that?
Very much so. And there's some really outstanding stories that haven't been publicized. You take a gentleman like Alistair Furman.
Okay. Yeah.
Alistair Furman, who was so active in the real estate community of Greenville, going back to the early 1900s.
Wow.
And what he did throughout the city.
Yeah.
And that's true. We host a lecture series with the Clemson Master of Real Estate Development Program, which is the Charles Fraser Lecture Series. Now, Charles Fraser, as you know, was the developer of Sea Pines in Hilton Head and many other places as well. So we've had over the years a number of his former lieutenants come in who all rose to prominent positions throughout the country.
Wow.
And we have these taped lectures from these people that recall their early days working for Charles Fraser. So there's another area of real estate history that I want to delve into.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So retirement looks good. You're going to stay a little bit kind of at arm's length with teaching a few classes. What's kind of your outlook on the future with the upstate, with Greenville? How do you kind of see things continue to grow?
I'm optimistic about it. I mean, I'm very bullish on, I think, what Greenville has ahead of itself. Now, there's some challenges, obviously.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to, growing up in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlotte, unfortunately, lost, in my opinion, much of its downtown character with so many structures that were demolished. It became somewhat sterile. But Greenville has done a good job. They've looked at other markets, other cities, and they've tried to do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about Greenville is they like to bring in prominent planning consultant firms.
Yeah.
And I think Greenville's been well planned. Looking ahead, it's a lot of fun to see what's happened, because when I first came here, and for the first decade or so, a lot of the young people did not want to stay in Greenville once they finished college.
They wanted to go to Atlanta or Charlotte.
Very much so.
Yeah,
they really did, or even at Charleston. But it's changed now, where it's an attractive city for young people. Baby boomers who have formerly lived in the suburbs have come to downtown Greenville. It's got some interesting dynamics in terms of the real estate market. I think a lot of the multifamily growth has been fueled as Greenville being a second home urban market, where folks who may have a residence up at the Cliffs or the Reserve, or maybe even another city, they like having a weekend destination like Greenville to come to. Right. So a lot of those apartment units, even condos, have been bought by those people. So, you walk down Main Street, and it's fun to overhear people talk about where they're from, what they like, and what they're seeing in Greenville. Yeah,
that's amazing.
That's awesome. I don't work for the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, we really appreciate you having you on board today.
Thanks. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for sharing your stories, and wish you well in retirement.
Thank you.
Come back and visit us again, and thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. I do have a little something for you.
Oh, yeah.
Little gift.
Thank you.
It's your field notebook.
Oh, right. I take good notes. I go through these things a lot. Every day I got a to-do list.
Oh, well, even as a Citadel graduate, it does have the Clemson Master of Real Estate Development Program on the cover, but it's pretty subdued.
I love it. It's great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.